Welcome to Operating with Positive Impact, a brand new series of podcasts brought to you by PwC. My name is Anthony Neve, and throughout this series, I'll be your personal guide in shaping your organization into a sustainable business. Together, we will deep dive into the world of sustainability and its impact on the business world.
In our last episode, we discussed the monumental challenge of transitioning to a low-carbon economy. One of the solutions that we often think about to solve it is the circular economy. While it can be a true carbon reduction solution for some, there are other reasons why companies are looking into circular business models. In this episode, we will discover a broader perspective on why this concept is becoming critical in securing the long-term viability of certain businesses. Jochen Vincke, the sustainability lead for PwC Belgium, will host Christoph Vanderstricht, a PwC expert in circular economy. Let's listen to their conversation.
Hello and welcome to another episode of our ESG podcast series where we explore the fascinating world of sustainable business challenges and practices. As you know, we will base ourselves on the different chapters of our book, Operating with Positive Impact. I'm Jochen Vincke, your host of today. I'm the sustainability leader for PwC Belgium, and I'm very happy to invite Christoph Vanderstricht into this discussion on circular economy. Christoph is one of our global experts in this field, and we're very happy to be able to listen to Christoph today. So a very warm welcome, Christoph.
Hi, Jochen. Thank you for having me today. I am excited to dive with you together into the world of circular economy. First of all, because it's a very important topic for companies and countries, especially when we look at Europe and the US. Why is that? Because it basically will determine who's going to be the losers and the winners in the future. Scarcity of resources has been named as one of the top 10 critical risks for this year, and I'm actually convinced that this will remain over the next coming 10 to 20 years. It's also a risk for stability in economic terms, as climate change has a lot of stress on populations in terms of access to water and arable land. The same thing will happen because shortage of access to critical materials on top will have a similar dramatic effect and will probably lead to some externalities or tragic impacts for industries and countries if no action is taken. And one of them is basically that companies and countries should work together, but it's actually not what we see today in the market when we look at the stress.
Can you give some examples of critical resources that are running out of?
Well, it's obvious, like was stated in the World Economic Forum a few weeks ago. Lithium, nickel, copper actually are all very critical. If you look at the prognosis for 2029, then actually you see that there's about 89% shortage. If you calculate and if you sum up, let's say, for instance, electrification of the automotive, but also when you look at the robotics, the growth in IT, etc., this will basically create that issue. Basically, that means that if you want to sell 10 cars, for instance, and you look in 2029, then actually you're sure you can sell 1.2 cars. If you add everything on that through circular economy, everything which is to be recycled can be recycled. You actually can add 1.2, 1.5 or more. So basically you come to 2-3 cars out of the 10. You are a specialist in everything which is manufacturing, so you basically know what it means for a plant. Is it break even or not? If it's not break even, if you need to sell 5 cars to be break even, you can only sell 2. That basically will have a huge impact in the way how companies are organized.
You're even looking at this on a global scale. So if you look at geopolitics today, there will be a bigger disbalance, I think, in where those resources will be available and where they won't. So I think we're heading into a bit of a troubled field in here.
Yes, and actually the word war is possible, but especially when you look at measures, for instance, countries are taken. So Chile, in relation to lithium, actually has announced in April last year that they were going to nationalize the lithium market, basically to protect their reserves. Similar actions have been undertaken by Canada and Australia.
Yeah, I guess this is a trend that we'll see more and more coming up. And although circular economy has been around for a while, it's maybe good to think about. It's not only those critical resources, but also the World Economic Forum came out and said that we're actually using 1.6 times the number of resources we're creating every year. So, and there's even a prediction that goes up to 3 to 4 times as much by 2050. So it's clear that the traditional linear model right? That we use or retake, make, and dispose of products and resources, that is no longer valid. But before we go there, let's maybe take a moment to identify what the circular economy system actually is. It's a system that aims to redefine, improve, or shift the way we design products and value propositions, what and how we source, how we produce, consume, and how we maximize the value of those products and how we re-inject those at the end of their lifetime into another loop. In that sense, making waste, again, a valuable resource to be reused in our economy is actually the way to go forward here. Okay, so we've defined circular economy, and it sounds like a lot of work and a big chunk of your resources and money could go into this as a company, but why should companies and countries actually invest in circular economy?
Well, actually, it's as well, as I said already before, in relation to countries, it will define the economic strength of a country. It will define, in the end, because the scarcity, they will have an impact on the industry base, and it will define where and how production will happen. Basically, if there is no production of electric vehicles anymore or cars anymore in Germany, well, you can just consider and think about the impact on the overall economy. Now, this has to do, one of the reasons is that this will have to do with the fact of access to resources. So access of resources is a problem not only for a country, but first of all, for a company. And when you then consider that if you cannot secure access to a specific resource, then actually you'll have to reconsider your value proposition, looking what you want, or actually what your clients want and what your clients need. And it's that stress item that basically will define whether or not you're going to have a top line. So basically you're going to have sales or not. If you want to sell, if your clients want to buy a specific product, for instance, in relation to reduced carbon footprint is one of the things. Circular economy can help in reducing, but it can also be it's not helping. But that's only one thing. But it's mainly about the rat race for securing access to those resources, which actually, if you understand there is nothing like that, then you need to redesign and rethink the way how you're going to construct your value proposition, which is either the design of your product, or you will check and go into, for instance, like a product as a service. Again, the example of automotive, cars will not become cheaper. Cars will become more expensive. That's a given. Why? Because if you have shortage of 89% to create and develop on the basis of the current technological situation, then actually you're going to have less cars. Less cars means higher prices. So basically there will be a shift. So that's also what you see now today already for a few years, is that you have car sharing. So sharing models will become more important. Goes hand in hand with other things, but this is one good example, I think, to see how and what this is going to define and redefine the competitiveness and also the profitability of a company. And secondly, for companies, it's important to maximize the value and to retain control over the product once it's out in the market. And that is what you see in many cases. What people are trying to do, or companies are trying to do, is actually getting access and retain control over it whenever it sits with a consumer. So that is, I think, why it's important, because it will define your top line and your bottom line in the end.
And if I look to a lot of companies out there, you see that certain companies have made a business strategy out of going for a circular model. We know Umicore, for example, in Belgium as one of the examples. Do you think circular economy will become mainstream? How do you look at this?
I do believe that in a big number of sectors, it will become mainstream. Yes, absolutely. Because actually it's about what and how can I make sure that I will have a customer, and if I have enough volume to sell to my customer. So basically it's completely integrally connected with business strategies. Because if you see that you don't have access to a resource, you don't have a product, you don't have a customer, you don't have income. So for that reason already alone, it's going to be, I think, very important that companies start to think strategically about circular economy. Whereas actually what we have seen in the last years, when we endeavored into a project together with a client, many cases we see that it's fragmented, not connected to the business strategy, and it's opportunistic. So basically it happens because something happens. And then they say, we need to do this. But this is not all the time connected. And then actually you see that those kind of, those kind of projects, they actually fail over the long run.
If you look at it from a European perspective, there's been a lot of criticism on CSRD and the reporting requirements which are being asked from companies are really, really strict and quite cumbersome, labor intensive, you would say. And it's a different approach to making Europe more green, and you would, for example, see in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is more a stimulation act. How do you look at this? Will the CSRD requirements in terms of reporting, do you see this pushing us extra towards circular models because emissions will have to be reported on and so on? How do you look at this, Christoph?
Well, first of all, CSRD is a reporting obligation.
Mm-hmm.
Circular economy is part of it because you need to report what you have done in the field of whatever. Circular economy is one of them. But I think circular economy is not driven mainly because of CSRD. It's mainly driven because of the business and the survival of a company. So from that angle, it's something else. I also see sometimes that circular economy is connected to climate change. Now, you can have, if you want to reduce your footprint, it's possible that circular economy will help, but it's not always the case. Some cases it will not help. But still, without circular economy model, it might be that you're out of business all over, altogether. Because you don't have, you cannot develop the value proposition anymore.
We see that the European Union has put in place a lot of new legislation. Can you give some examples of things that might be heading our way, which will have a big impact?
Well, first of all, you have the Green Deal, which is actually not. It's a package of regulations. There's about 83, 85, I think, underlying actions or coming directives, regulations. The first thing which is obvious when you look at that program is that, whereas actually in the past we had the battery directive, you had the packaging directive, you have end-of-life vehicle directive. These new versions are not directives anymore. So basically, it means that it's directly. It's like more technical standard, so it's a regulation. So that's first of all. So there is no transposition anymore into the member states, which basically should guarantee a more homogeneous implementation. Now, when we look at, for instance, the battery regulation has nothing to do anymore with the content of the battery directives because it's focusing mainly on, I think, more focusing on creating and sustaining that industry base for automotive. One of the good examples derived from there is that you have not only recycled content obligations, which kick in end of the 20s, start of the 30s, but also that you see that on the basis of that, there has been action undertaken by countries and companies like the Global Battery Alliance, where I think we have been working on from our German colleagues. Another one is the packaging directive, which is now packaging regulation. It still has to be voted. But there as well, you see a trend that actually you have access to resources, which becomes a topic. So for instance, in the French, but that's battery again, in France, there has been a decision taken that the OEMs will have priority access to the resource. So whereas actually in the past, this was not the case. So basically what happens in your linear model and throwaway model, what happens is actually it ends up with the recycler or with the shredder, and then, it goes somewhere. We don't know where. And then it's re-injected. Basically, that creates cost. And I think that France basically has looked at this and said, okay, we need to give priority access to the OEM, where he can directly or she can directly re-inject it in the construction of a new one. Basically, this has two impacts. First of all, the access itself, but secondly as well, that the cost of re-injecting it is normally lower. And you see similar kind of actions and discussions going on at European level, for instance, also on packaging, where also there is a kind of discussion with beverage companies, in that case, to get better and faster access to, for instance, plastic, PET. PET is is a highly valuable product. Majority of fast fashion is developed from PET. idea and the purpose there is actually to have it re-injected, first of all, to construct and develop new bottles, rather than actually going for upcycling or downcycling.
Yeah, the fashion industry is a very renowned example of how much is actually wasted in terms of resources next to the food industry, of course. But so, Christoph, taking a step back and looking at how companies actually look at implementing circularity and more sustainable value chains, we'll have a look at one of the surveys that we did as PwC. There you would see that companies actually, as a main measure, look at resource efficiency to actually improve the bottom line, but also reinvent their business model in terms of circularity. And you also see that 65% of the companies aim to implement a more holistic approach in terms of circularity in the next 2 years. So indeed, the trend is set, and I think we can look at a lot of hopefully exciting examples out there in how circularity can become part of a business model.
Well, I think you have one yourself in the construction sector, where you looked at alternative substitutes for resources, which is actually even closer than yeah.
Indeed, but we see it coming everywhere, and there's companies reevaluating the components and the resources they use. And the case we're talking about was one where glucose was actually harvested from food-grade material, and we looked for a second source where we could actually use glucose coming out of waste, municipal waste from communities. So I think it's a very good example of how companies start to reinvent themselves, looking at the resources that they actually use, and in that sense, really do better in terms of how they can reuse waste from other processes and then introduce that into their processes.
Yeah, I think that's indeed a very good example. And actually, when you look at that survey also says not only that these are the plans, but also actually states that the way how they have been implemented so far is not right at state of the art. So I said it already, it's a fragmented, opportunistic, no internal integration, cooperation, alignment, or in many cases, the capability you need. They have defined very good strategies, but then actually there's a lack of connecting those into the daily work of the people. A good example of that is a client who ever want to develop a kind of product as a service model. For what reason? To actually retain end-of-life product access. But actually the whole thing failed. Why? Because the salespeople, which were normally selling the products, were now sent out to close leasing contracts. They didn't do it because they were not rewarded for it. Yeah. So it basically shows that just for the fact that was not accounted for in one little box in the reporting of salespeople, that actually the whole system didn't already fail. It shows that capabilities need to be present, and that goes about and governance and KPIs and incentives and so on, technology.
Yeah. I get the fact that you need to look at it holistically. You need to look at the governance surrounding the responsibilities, the change management linked to it, of course, and not put your circular initiative in a small part next to your normal business. In that sense, I was also thinking about one of the things, because we know each other, of course, quite well. One of the things we discussed over the last couple of years many times is having a control over the flow of your resources, a control kind of control tower principle. If you look at that, how important is that factor in a circular economy model?
Yes, indeed, you're absolutely right, Jochen. A control tower concept is actually key, whether it's set up for an individual company or for peers or for even cross-industry. And the example I gave already in relation to the Global Battery Alliance, I think is a very good example, where you basically try to pull together, because you all have the same strategic needs and purpose, which is actually the key factor to set up whatever kind of control tower you do with more than one company. And then actually you start to build whatever is necessary to create a level playing field and make sure actually that access or control over access is guaranteed.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges on the technology side to building those control towers. I think we will need a whole new episode to talk about that specifically. But as a last part, maybe, Christoph, let's maybe have a look at a couple of interesting examples of how you see circularity out there and typical companies or examples that you have noticed which are worthwhile mentioning.
Well, of course, there is the let's say the ones everyone knows in the world. It's IKEA, it's Patagonia, and others. But I do believe that a very good example of a project we developed over the last year is related to digital deposit or return models. It's actually a model where we combine digital tooling and reverse logistics. The biggest challenge in many cases with closing the loop down the stream for consumers is basically getting access from the product. And I think that we developed some nice example how you can actually make sure that you can get at the lowest cost possible the product you put on the market. Whereas actually IKEA, for instance, has the buyback system and the One Wear program of Patagonia. This model here is basically making sure that you, as a consumer, you have an incentive to send it back at the expense of the brand owner at the location where he or she needs it, to basically putting it back into the economy, whether it's under repair or under reuse or under recycling.
And then just to be clear, we're talking about PET bottles and cans in this case.
Yes, this was in relation to household packaging or beverage packaging. However, the digital, let's say, return scheme or models are even more relevant and more interesting on fashion for everything which actually sold online. You can actually generate and create incentives, better bonding from a commercial brand recognition. And from a positive side, positive impact, because that's what this program is about, is actually that you will see that the mountains which are generated in the US, but also in other countries, of returnables, which are never sorted out, there's nothing done with it, which is a pure waste, that is actually avoided because you actually bring it and you send it there where the brand wants it to do something with it, be it reuse, resale, recycling, etc., etc.
I think the tagline here can be waste does not exist. And every waste is, again, a valuable resource to be reused.
Whether it's for you or for someone else.
Indeed. Good. And with that said, I think it is an exciting area to work in circularity. So at PwC, we're also very proud that we can make a difference and our clients really working on circularity and making our world a better place and a more sustainable place to live in. I would like to thank all of you listeners for dialing in. I'm looking forward to our next episode. And this is Christoph and Jochen signing out.